From the world of AV programming and control with James King, I'm Steve Greenblatt, and this is Ask the Programmer. Hey, James, how are you today? I'm glad we're back and having another great conversation.
Doing good, Steve, and how are you doing?
I'm doing well. We, uh, if you tuned into our last episode, we had a little bit of fun. We asked ChatGPT a question that we felt was something that would come up about Ask the Programmer, and we've done that again for this episode. So we're going to chat a little bit about that. You ready for it?
Sure.
So it's commonly misunderstood about what do programmers do, and we talked about that a bit in the last episode. So we went and tried to see what ChatGPT says about where programmers' time is spent. So let me talk through some of the answers. So we said, what is the percentage of an AV programmer's time that's spent on programming versus other activities? So here's the breakdown. The first was programming and coding, which you would think would be the highest, and that came in at 30 to 40%. The second was system design and planning, which came into 20 to 30%. And that may vary depending on what a programmer in a certain organization does. The third, troubleshooting and testing, 15 to 25%. And the fourth, collaboration and meetings, 10 to 20%. Fifth is documentation and training at 5 to 10%. And the sixth is research and learning, 5 to 10%. So you have some initial thoughts on that?
Yeah, I do. Really, what kind of struck me was number five. Because I actually feel, at least in like my experience, I do a lot more than 5 to 10% on training and documentation. It's one of those fields that no one enjoys doing. I mean, training, people tend to enjoy that one, but more the documentation, people tend not to enjoy that one and always wait. But I feel it takes the most time, especially if you're writing your code very well. You need well documented what's going on. If your code's sloppy, your documentation is going to be sloppy. So I really feel, me personally, I think that should be higher. That's my thought. I would say almost in the 25% range. What would you say?
I think when I first saw I documentation and training, I thought that there needed to be some context there. So I'll add that to it because it could be looked at in a couple of different ways. I was thinking documentation of the system, the program, the user guide versus training being, are you training yourself to be a better programmer, or are you training the users to program a system, to use the system? So it says here, creating user manuals, system documentation, and technical guides, preparing training materials, and conducting training sessions. So I think it might depend on where you are in the industry. So doesn't surprise me that in your situation, you're very close to the user. So your training materials and your training effort is very important because you are trying to make it so that you can cut down on your service calls, cut down on your help requests, increase comfort with your systems, and make sure that your users are in the know on how to properly use your system. Your documentation could be inside code or outside code as well. So I don't in my part of the industry, we would do a user guide or technical reference, but it wouldn't be necessarily very custom. It would likely be turned over to somebody who would then wrap it into a larger training component. So and our training face to face with a user was minimal. So I guess it depends on the role that you play.
Yeah, I can see that. That makes sense.
I mean, I certainly see the value of it, and I certainly see. I would. I would say that there isn't enough, as long as the documentation is accurate and is going to be used, it's always very valuable. It's when you put the time in and it sits on the shelf that people don't really appreciate.
Oh yeah, that how often does that happen where our documentation, you write it, you put it out there and no one use it, and then you always love when they call for help and they're like, "Hey, I don't know how to do this thing." And you're like, "Well, if you pull up the documentation on this page, it actually explains how to do that."
Or the other side is when you update the system and then they try to use documentation that isn't updated. So that's always hard too.
Oh yeah.
I The part that I would hone in on, and I guess maybe it would fall under collaboration and meetings, is project management. I think that there's still a good amount of project management that goes into to programming. So it says collaboration in meetings 10 to 20%, communicating with clients, designers, installers, and other stakeholders. We talked about that in the last episode about how programmers really need to work with other people and they can't just be in a bubble. Um, Attending project meetings and coordination sessions, providing technical support and consulting. Um, I, I I would maybe inch that up a little bit. I think that project management and getting all the information you need and being and also defining what the code is going to like clarifying the scope, all those there's always been a significant emphasis on that in my world at least. I could see where an internal programmer might not have that because they could just lean on somebody else on their team.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. It I think understanding the scope is important, even internal, because I mean our projects are always changing and moving and evolving. So you gotta really understand what's going on with it for it to fully work correctly.
Just a question, if you were doing something internally, do you have to get a scope signed off by somebody? Is that a component of your effort, or is it just a matter of you saying this is what it's supposed to be and this is what we're going to do?
So that's a very good question. I don't think we have a formal process, that gets the scope clear. Well, we clear the scope of what we're doing. We make sure that the team understands it, but I don't know if it ever goes for like official, like, oh, it has to go to this person, get approval, all that stuff. It's kind of one of those where we do it internally, make sure we understand what we're doing and we understand it, but it kind of stays there.
Yeah.
But that's a good one.
Okay. So, I mean, I could see where you're going to have to live with it if it isn't right, but I could also see where you'd like to ensure with your client, the users, that what you're providing is going to be what they're expecting or is going to align with what they're looking for.
So I think a lot of that happens with our initial meeting. And then we do have follow-ups and all that stuff. Like currently I'm working on a project now where I remember sitting down with the user and they first started saying, well, I want this device here. I want this device here. I'm like, hold on, let's bring it back. I'm like, just tell me what success looks like in the room. And I'm like, what do you want to do? Don't tell me equipment. Just tell me what success looks like. I'll figure out the equipment for you. And but I actually was shocked how hard that was for the user to actually explain what they were looking for success. Because they kept trying to go back to like, well, we want this here, we want this many displays or this many cameras. I'm like, hold on, no, just tell me what it looks like. Or they're like, well, we know we can't do this. I'm like, well, let's add it to the list. If I can achieve it, maybe we can. I like throw everything in the list and let me see what we can work with. Because I rather sit there and understand what the user wanted and be like, okay, sorry, we can't achieve that because, security or It's one of those minority reports things that you can't do yet. It's only on TV. Um, then to actually have them come in the room and be like, "Well, I thought it was going to do this, and it didn't."
which I think in this list that probably falls under system design and planning. And if you were to add that one and the collaboration and meetings together, I think that those two incorporate the percentages that I was looking for. So it's a system design and planning is 20 to 30%, collaboration and meetings 10 to 20. So it adds up to 20 to 50%. That's a lot. So 50% of what you do has nothing to do with code, has it's just a matter of setting yourself up for success.
I agree. And the more you set yourself up for success, the less I feel programming and actually the less troubleshooting you need to do.
So troubleshooting and testing 15 to 25%. What are your thoughts about that?
I I'm okay with those numbers, but I really think that might almost need a wider range because um it's one of those things is if you do a lot of your homework and your due diligence in those other areas, the less troubleshooting you need to do. And also, especially in my world, a lot of spaces are cookie cutters. So, you work out the bugs in one and you can easily get through the others. Um, but then you do get into those special cases where it's a unique space where you might be doing the 25% troubleshooting. Like I say, I almost say it's from like a 5% to like a 25% range, depending on what you've done ahead of time and what project it is.
Yeah, actually, it's a really, really good point. I think it's something you can control if you're smart about it. And it does depend on your risk tolerance. It depends on how well you do some of the other components. A really good point. If you do the system planning and design and the collaboration and meetings well, you could probably cut down on your troubleshooting and testing time. And if you keep your scope management reasonable as well, you'll that'll keep this from getting even larger.
Agree.
So the main takeaway from this that when I was looking at it originally was that programming and coding is 30 to 40%. You think that that's an accurate representation?
Yeah, maybe even a little less.
Yeah.
If again, I would say it's how much due diligence you do ahead of time. Again, especially in my world with a lot of being cookie cutters is okay, I wrote, the module that turns on and off displays. I can use that in all of my program. I don't have to rewrite that. That's done. Now I'm more efficient and I can get my percentage of where I'm actually writing code down to lower. It's and we have less, especially in my realm, less one-offs. We have a lot of repeats and stuff, so like that. And then of course taking advantage of third-party programmers who make drivers, modules, plugins makes it even easier.
Yep. Great point, and thanks for mentioning that. I think just to clarify, it says here writing, testing, and debugging code, developing control systems and user interfaces, integrating software with hardware components. To your point, so as Craig said in a previous episode, Craig Underwood from Moravian University, he really looks to select hardware that has pre-developed and proven integrations because he doesn't want to make his life any more difficult. But what you said is really valid. Let's design our systems to leverage what we've done in the past, and let's not reinvent the wheel.
Yeah.
So I think the main takeaway from all of this and is that coding is not really the most critical part of a programmer's role. And I'm curious to hear what our audience has to say about this, what their experience is, if they agree with these percentages, and if they have a different take on it. But it just seems that there's a lot more that goes into a programmer's job, and there's also a lot more that goes into a programmer being successful than just writing code. So, um, any closing thoughts?
No, I think that sums it up pretty well. And I know we spit out some numbers, and again, my numbers are going to be different than your numbers, Steve. So I think all of us are a little different, but yeah, it's interesting, and I think that sums it up pretty well.
I think that's a good one too. I'd be curious to hear what other people think, and if you are going to comment, then you should do this in our LinkedIn group for Ask the Programmer. Let us know you what type of organization you work for. Are you an integrator, an in-house integrator, an independent programmer, or a freelancer, or whatever other parts of the industry you focus on? Because like you said, it's going to vary, and there's going to be different parts of it, and I think that there's no one size fits all. So, James, how could people get in touch with you, keep up with what you're doing, and carry on this conversation?
Again, you Google me, you'll find me. I'm on the social, as AV_James King. Anything with HETMA, I'm there. LinkedIn, our LinkedIn group, as you mentioned, I'm there as well. Again, Google me, you'll find me.
And for me, you can reach me on social media at Steve Greenblatt. My company, Control Concepts, is actually a supporter of the Ask the Programmer show. If you'd like to be a supporter of the show, please contact us and let us know. We'd like to certainly mention you and promote what you're doing. My company helps programmers with the building blocks that they need to either interface with products, be more efficient, or add more functionality to their projects. So if you want to learn more, you can reach us at controlconcepts.net. And we definitely want to continue this conversation, and we're building a community for Ask the Programmer on LinkedIn. So join our group there, leave a rating, review, comments, let us know what you think. And I hope that we can continue this conversation, because this would be interesting to hear what other people, how they break down their percentages. So we'll be posting about that, and please help us to carry on that conversation. And it's also good to help the industry understand uh, what we do, and what demystify some of the parts about AV programming that they don't quite understand. You can catch our podcast on video on YouTube, audio on your favorite podcast player. And until next time, this has been Ask the Programmer.